Hello, I'm Mizo. Today I'm going to discuss the flying horse of Islam. The story goes something like this. One morning, Muhammad called his followers over and told him that he had gone from Mecca to Jerusalem, the Temple Mount, prayed out there. From there, he went to the heavens, talked to the old prophets who acknowledge him as their head, and talked to Allah and visited heaven, and then came back to the Temple Mount, and from there he came to Mecca. Well, obviously the question was asked that how did you manage to do this all in one night? Muhammad says that you see the horse out there that had wings in the night, and I flew it all the way there, and he was very powerful that time, so nobody questioned him. Uh, in some stories, it is a donkey. There are different versions of it. Now this is he was trying to prove that he is now is the not only the prophet but he is the supreme prophet. However, this story shows a lot of problems. There are a lot of problems with this story. Let us examine them one by one. First of all, the wings of the horse. Well, bats have wings and birds have wings. Horses have legs. But now that we have actually dissected these animals, we find that the bone structure is essentially the same. It is the arrangement of the bones that forms the four limbs of the horse and the wings of the bat and the bird. And the same bone structure also actually is for human beings also, but we have got hands. So that they did not know at that time, and it betrays a lack of knowledge of anatomy. Now, if Allah is the maker of everything and He is the creator of everything, then He should be knowing that how the bones and the anatomy of a horse and a bird or a bat or a man is arranged. This obviously shows that the story was written by people who did not know these things, and it's not very exceptional, because in those days they didn't know about these things, and science was just beginning out there. In fact, the first dissections took place about 1,000 years later. So, but let us assume that the horse got a set of bones and could actually have a wing. Now the horse weighs about 300 kilos, and with a passenger it weighs about 400 kilos. Now for 400 kilos to fly with a wing, uh, the wingspan must be at least 20 feet, if not more. Now a 20 feet wingspan, when it beats in flight, it will actually break up. The strength that is required to push and pull the wing bones, the wing bones won't stand it. So there is a lack of knowledge about strength of materials. But we overlook that. So we have a horse with a 20-foot wingspan. But then there's another problem here. The problem here is that to power the wings, we must have a lot of muscle. So a 400 kilo horse with a 20-foot wing would require at least 200 kilos of muscles to power it. So the horse now is about 600 kilos. So it's got wings, it's got muscles, and even the muscles actually distributed. But let us see that. Let us see it. You give it that muscle. So you have the muscle and the horse and the wing and everything you have, and it can fly. No, it can't, because see, the wings by itself cannot fly. You need a tail. Yes, pure wings can fly, but if they're delta wings start from the nose and go all the way to the rear. So if that is the case, there is no place for a passenger to sit. So the horse has got to develop a tail, and the tail is going to be an aerodynamic tail. It's not a tail with hair that horses usually have. So now the horse will weigh about 650 kilos. Unfortunately, the distance between uh, Mecca to Jerusalem is about 1200 kilometers one way, and uh, way and back is about 2400 kilometers. For a horse that weighs about 650 kilos to go from Mecca to Jerusalem, flying it and back, will require about 500 kilos of nutrients, and our digestive system that is huge beyond comprehension. And when in flight, the oxygen requirements is so high that the heart would have to be very big and the lungs have to be very big. So you have a huge digestive system and a huge circulation system. So a 650 kilo horse will won't do. No, you require a horse which is nearly a ton now, and uh, these things those people probably did not understand, and it is a man-made thing. If Allah had said these things, He would be knowing this stuff like energy requirements and the digestive systems and all those things. Now, how fast a winged horse can fly? When you're talking about these things, it looks so like you're discussing it, but obviously horses can't have wings. But even if you give it everything, how fast a horse can fly? Normally, birds can fly at a maximum speed of 100 kilometers an hour. When they dive, they come to about 200 kilometers an hour. So let us give it 200 kilometers an hour. A horse with 20-foot wings going at 200 kilometers an hour, the wings will simply fold up and break away. The air resistance is so huge. But even if you give it that, then another problem arises. There is a ceiling in height of winged flight. On the ground is zero. In 1900s, they had dozens of these machines. We had flapping wings, and the flapping wing aircraft, all of them failed. None of them actually succeeded. So there is no practical aircraft that actually had flapping wings. Now we got very small drones that have got flapping wings, but they are designed on insects basically. They're not still designed on birds and bats. So it is one of these things. So anyway, like you have this animal, you got a ceiling of 4 kilometers up in the air. It can't fly beyond that, because beyond that the oxygen becomes so thin that the horse cannot breathe. It will simply asphyxiate and die. And at those heights is extremely cold. You require a lot of clothing and goggles and caps and things like that, like you see in the fighter pilots of World War One. They used to dress with those things because it's not stylish. They used to dress it because they had to go up in the air and it was very cold out there in the air. So it was a necessity. It is not a statement of fashion, which the Prophet does not know, because nobody has actually traveled at those heights. So there is another problem there. It is all man-made stuff, and then these people, they this even if you give it a wing and ability to fly and traveling at 200 kilometers an hour, which actually no winged animal can do, or even a winged mechanical airplane can do. The distance is up-down distance is 2,400 kilometers at the speed of 200 kilometers an hour, that takes 12 hours. And the time available is 12 hours because the Prophet, he he went there in the night. So if you give it a 12-hour night, it the whole of the time he was just flying from Jerusalem to Mecca to Jerusalem and back. So they don't understand distance, and they don't understand speed. They don't understand time. These things, nowadays we understand so easily. There's no problem here. But in those days, they didn't understand these things. Uh, they had this basic knowledge that in one day you can cover so much by walking. But these distances are beyond comprehension for people of those days. People didn't travel more than 20 kilometers either way from the village. And I know people, I really know people who haven't traveled more than that in the whole of their lifetime. This is the world they have seen. They lived in that 20-kilometer radius world, and they didn't need to go outside, so they don't know anything about the outside stuff. So these people, like even Muhammad, he was a travel man because he used to go around with his uncle, and uncle was a trader. But he didn't also understand this concept. So this is another man-made thing. The concept of time and distances and speeds. So even if you give all of this also, then there's yet another problem, because he goes to Jerusalem and goes to the Temple Mount, and the Temple Mount he flies to heaven. Now, as we see that going from Mecca to Temple Mount and back takes about 12 hours. So he didn't have any actually time to fly from there to heaven. But let us assume that he actually did fly. So there is no heaven 4 kilometers up in the sky. So he would have to travel somewhere on the ground in a radius about 100 kilometers. So if this story is true, heaven is 100 kilometers away from Jerusalem. Now this thing betrays a lack of geography now. In those days you could say such things because people didn't know geography. They probably did not even understand their surroundings, leave alone a place like Jerusalem. So there is no heaven even a 1,000 kilometer radius. In fact, those areas are the worst areas in the world, and people run away from there. Uh, they're the areas that actually produce refugees, leave alone being they're just hell on earth. They just produce refugees and nothing all. Those areas are definitely not heaven. But according to the story, heaven is in a radius of about 100 kilometers from Jerusalem, which is unbelievable. It cannot happen. Heaven has got to be a huge place. It's got to accommodate millions and millions of people with streams of honey and milk and all those things. In case of Islam, there's a river of wine also. A lot of things are involved here, and there is also hell, and so there is a lot of real estate space which is not available there now. You can't see it. So after this, there's a last and a very small niggling detail. The Temple Mount was always one of the centers of religion. Is not only about Islam. It's about the Jewish faith, and it's about Christianity, and it's about the pagan religions too. So that temple, what you can call it, that temple has got in those days also probably had hundreds of priests and hundreds of servants and thousands of people offering their homage and giving the offerings in the day, in the night. They would probably clean the stuff, clean the area. Basically, it's a 24-hour job, and you can imagine a guy coming on a 1-ton horse, flying horse, comes out there and offers his prayers, and then goes back to his 1-ton horse. 1-ton horse, they can't stand on his feet also. But leave that aside. So, and then he flies away to heaven, then comes back, and then again goes inside, offers his prayers, and then goes on a 1-ton horse and goes back. As the news of the century, the news forever. I mean, such a thing, if it had ever happened, would still be the people still be talking about that in Palestine, and it didn't happen because it was never recorded. Temple Mount is not some secluded area. It's an important place of Palestine. Even now, if you go in the night out there, there are lots of people hanging around, security and things like that. It can't happen. So even that small part uh, is not true, and it can only be said by a person who does not understand how temples work, and who does not understand reporting. And if Allah is all knowing, then He should be understanding these things. So it's clearly man made. The whole story from end to end is man made. And why do holy books have these stories? See, in the days when these books were written, about 1 to 2% of the people actually could read these books. The rest of the people were illiterate. So basically, I had this book in which the establishment could read it, and the general population were unable to read it. And they would say that these are the things in the book, and if you have accepted this religion, and so you got to do these things. And people did it, and they found pleasure in doing it, and that's how thing worked. So they have this outrageous stories in it, and when things were getting hot, they would say, "Look, this is the way it is." But Islam is different. Islam is different because the Prophet was not divine. Prophet was an ordinary man, and Angel Gabriel used to come to him and tell him a lot of commandments, and he would convey it to his followers, and the followers would basically learn it. So the Quran was oral in the beginning. However, I digress. The whole stuff is man-made. It is people who have forked out the story. Basically, they just made it up. And they didn't have an understanding of aerodynamics, of strength of materials, of geography, of time, space, speed, distance, reporting, how temples are managed, all basic stuff. And they didn't know it, so it is not divine. Uh, so with this, I thank you for listening to my small lecture. This is Mizo signing off.